phenomenal.
それでは早速全速前進
You know what the weak point of a mech is? The fucking pilot.
Get away from her, you bitch!
His papers say he was a raven.
Protocol 3.
A pattern blue!
Welcome to On the Shoulders of Giants, a giant robot power hour discussing mechs across media, their stories, and why we love them. I'm Nico, and I'm joined for a bonus episode by Alice.
Hello, I'm Alice.
And Brian.
Hey gamers, I'm Brian.
Yeah, a little different this time. We are sitting down for a short bonus episode, sober for once, on a notorious but compelling short story, I Sexually Identify as an Attack Helicopter by Isabel Fall. Let's launch into it.
I sexually identify as an attack helicopter. I lied. According to U.S. Army Technical Manual 0, the soldier, as a system, attack helicopter, is a gender identity, not a biological sex. My dog tags in Form 3349 say my body is an XX karyotype somatic female. But, really, I didn't lie. My body is a component in my mission, subordinate to what I truly am. If I say I am an attack helicopter, then my body, my sex, is too.
So, you know how when, media properties, like podcasts or YouTubers, they do, different mini-series within their series, and, the serious one has a funny name? What do we call this? The cockpit or the hangar talk or something?
I don't know. I think I'm good just calling it a bonus and just knowing that we went a little more serious this time because, I don't know, it's a shitty time to be trans, and this was another shitty time to be trans, and as much as I want to talk about it, I do want to be respectful of the fact that, there's a lot of tender feelings about this. I'll go ahead and jump in and start things off. So, yeah, this short story. A bit of context. If you've heard the phrase, I sexually identify as an attack helicopter thrown around, but you don't know its origin, you might have some wires crossed and think it came from this short story. That's what I thought for some reason, even though I had heard the phrase before I heard anything about this short story. The story was published in January 2020, and the copy pasta it takes its title from was from 2014. So that was a copy pasta that was keybound by a Team Fortress 2 player to spam in chat whenever gender came up, or sexuality or anything like that. So it was a hateful meme, and it continues to be a hateful meme, and variations on that and use of the phrase took off, particularly on 4chan, to mock queer people. The short story, I Sexually Identify as an Attack Helicopter, was published in issue 160 of the acclaimed genre fiction publication Clarkesworld magazine on January 1st, 2020. It was also released in audio form on the Clarkesworld magazine podcast, which is what you heard at the top there in lieu of music. That is the story as read by Kate Baker, the Clarkesworld podcast's regular narrator. This was Isabel Fall's first publication, and her author bio was just one sentence. It said Isabel Fall was born in 1988. The initial reception was mixed. Some liked the story and others disliked it, which is pretty typical. It's a short story, and Clarkesworld magazine is high profile, so there was a big audience. So there were a lot of people reading this. Except that the contents of the story, its title referring to a transphobic meme, and the lack of information on Isabel Fall raised questions for some readers. So speculation about who Isabel Fall was and what her intention was in writing the story soon spiraled into discourse on Twitter, which there's a reason I don't have a Twitter account, but I'm sure y'all have had rancid experiences if you regularly use it. There's a reason Brian's our social media manager, because I don't want to wade in, and Brian is braver than I am. So yeah, there was a lot of speculation going on. It exploded into discourse. Some people suspected that Fall endorsed the meme, that the story was an act of trolling, or that the 88 in her birth year given in the bio was a reference to the Nazi code number 1488.
That's a reach.
So they thought she might have been... reach, you might strain a muscle with that reach, but there were people who were looking for any kind of sign that this was bad faith, right? So there were some writers like Chuck Tingle and Carmen Maria Machado. They praised the story, but unfortunately other high-profile names, including N.K. Jemisin, shared the posts accusing the story of being hateful. It seemed to be that the vibe was be a good cis ally by boosting trans voices who had an issue with the story, but all that resulted in was a lot of people saw this stuff out of context, and it was a shitstorm. So as a result, Clark's World pulled the story after a few days. Initially, they said it was at the author's request, but later the editor, Neil Clark, said in a statement that it was taken down for the author's well-being. He revealed that Isabel Fall was a trans woman, but not out, thus the minimal biography and the negligible web presence, and that her mental health had suffered really badly after repeated online attacks, and that's something Fall herself confirmed in an interview with Vox in 2021. Clark said that Fall had meant the story to subvert and take power from the hateful meme, and that it had gone through multiple trans sensitivity readers before being published, but he apologized both to those hurt by the story and by those hurt by the ensuing discourse for what happened as a result. Fall retitled the story simply to Helicopter Story in the autumn of 2020. This was the title under which it was nominated for a Hugo Award, one of the most prestigious awards in genre fiction. But ultimately, she decided not to formally republish it, so it wasn't put back on the Clark's World magazine website, it wasn't re-released. Since then, Isabel Fall has had no activity on social media, has published nothing under that name. For all intents and purposes, Isabel Fall is gone. What did y'all know about this story and this situation before I brought it up as something we might cover?
I knew this was a story. I knew it as the meme. I played Team Fortress 2, but I'd never actually read this story. I'd read a synopsis of it, but that was about it.
Okay, Brian?
I didn't know anything about this. I'm pretty sure the first time I heard it was when Nico brought it to the table. Like Homestuck, it is just kind of like it is one of those corners that I maybe passed by and briefly cast a glance toward, and then went on my merry business, and then did not. It didn't click or slot into any memories for me. So this will be my first time with it. When was this published?
January 1st, 2020.
I would not have expected it to be. I just said when I said that, I had been framing it as a Homestuck era phenomenon, and I think that's just. I had a misunderstanding of the timeline on that one. So
I will say, so first of all, I had my wires crossed. For some reason, I thought that this short story had originated it, that bigots had stolen the phrase and used it to bad ends, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, it was actually a post on Tumblr. There've been a couple of posts people have been making, which are they redirect to the NeoCities website that hosts the PDF. And they're like, have you read this story? Please read the story, especially to people who only know about the controversy. The post's intention is to make people read the story and engage with the source material, which I think that's the major thing I have to say. If you've read the story, if you've actually read the story, and especially if you're queer, I don't know how you assume that this comes from a hateful place.
This was what Alice, what is your opinion on this? I really want to try and amplify Alice's voice, not to put her in the spotlight or on a pedestal, but
What?
I love you so much. Basically, I was saying that if you read the story, it's really hard to understand how people assumed that this was coming from a bad faith place of making fun of trans issues.
I think I can see it.
You can?
I think I can kind of see how people could twist it from this, because there are certain points where it talks about gender in a way that is so innate in what it means to be human, and that gender can be a spectrum in its own beautiful way, in the way bad actors will always take good things and turn them into their effort. I think you could do it, but also I'm coming at it from the other perspective than you, Nico. This was always the meme first to me. This was the first insult I heard about trans people online, which is, I identify as an attack helicopter. And so I always knew it from that. And I knew somebody wrote a story and I was like, oh, they're retorting to it. But nobody who needs to hear that retort will read this.
Right.
They'll just say, well, obviously, look at the number in the name, twitter.com.
Right.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because one of the things I don't know if you're just coming to this from I found this short story and I'm doing a glancing read on it. One of the things you may not see is how the perspective on gender that Alice just described that this story has is actually the perspective that the main character has, and their counterpart Axis does not have that perspective, and I think that dichotomy is actually really important to the story. But I can totally see how you kind of lose that when again, reading things online, responding to things online, doing discourse online is an extremely reactive activity. And so I can see how that kind of gets lost for sure.
post on their WordPress blog anymore. They post on Twitter for as many likes and seeks as they can see.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
nobody's writing just to write online anymore.
Yeah. So, yeah, all I knew about this was that I had heard the meme before. For some reason, I thought it came from the story, and then I saw that Tumblr post, and I was just laying in bed, so I clicked on the post, and I was like, I got time to read a short story, and I read the short story, and I immediately went, holy fucking shit, this is kind of so much of what we're talking about on this podcast, when we're talking about mech, gender, transhumanism, when we're talking about the military-industrial complex, when we're talking about turning up the dial on geopolitical conflict, when we're talking about all of this stuff. Like, this short story is engaging with all of it, and while it is not a mech short story, which is why it's a bonus and not a mainline, it is a story that gets at so many of the concerns, especially during the year in the shell. Like,
totally.
Honestly, I kept thinking it's kind of inappropriate, but I kept thinking about the Major and Bato in terms of people who have two very different perspectives on their physicality and expression, given modification for a specific state purpose.
I totally agree. I actually thought about that a lot too. I mean, I almost wanted to say Misato there. Kusanagi is very blasé about her gender presentation. Like, basically the only reason she stays in a female body is because she just like has a light preference towards it, right? You know, in the manga, as we discussed, like, she spends time in the bodies of men, or I guess I should say, in male presenting bodies. And I think one of the things that, you know, being someone who will never be as on Tumblr as they were between the years 2013 and 2016. I will say, I think one of the things that queer people in queer spaces online have yet to sort of figure out is that other people writing about and expressing and being curious about their journey through gender actually has nothing to do with you, and their experience and the way that they want to play with gender and identity does not have to be corrosive to the way that you play with your identity. And so, like, I think that's another thing that got kind of mixed up when this released, right? Is like, you know, you can not like Drag Race because it doesn't really fit your idea of gender, but I don't think you can in good faith say that Drag Race is transphobic inherently, because that is actually how a lot of people get into touch with why and how they are going to transition and in what ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's everyone has their own journey, and part of being queer is respecting that, I think.
You know, you can call Maho Shoujo transphobic as much as you want, but it's why I transitioned.
Yeah.
I had to get one joke into the episode. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
You're fine. We're allowed to joke. I just didn't want to be flippant about this, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's a major thing. Like Brian said, I mean, there was specifically an impulse. Oh my God, the blog, your fave is problematic. That just collated shit on people. And like, sometimes it was useful. It's like, damn, I didn't know that person literally like gay bashed someone, and this is a known incident that's been recorded, but it was in newspapers. You know, but there was a paranoia.
I want to honor the piece, not the controversy. Can we move to what we read?
Yes, totally.
We can.
Can we give a summary?
Yeah.
Do you have one? Okay.
In the future, a fragmented and environmentally devastated United States wages war on portions of itself using military hardware piloted by soldiers modified beyond training for their roles. A woman previously named So Ji-hee, or I think it's So Shi-hee, has been medically and psychologically reconditioned to identify her gender as Attack Helicopter, with the call sign of Barb as a new name, and is part of a strike on a high school supported by an AI-controlled splinter government. Because of the mandatory transition, waging war and acting as a machine is now part of Barb's identity, and she reflects on that in contrast to how she used to behave as a woman. During the strike and subsequent evasion of hostile aircraft, Barb's co-pilot Axis exhibits signs of unease with their reassigned gender that make Barb fear reprisal. As they struggle to escape, Barb contemplates this, her own history, and their intimate performance together as lethal military hardware, concluding that Axis's gender questioning is as necessary to their dynamic as instability is to the Apache Mystic helicopter they comprise.
This, I mean, I don't know, like, I have been reading a lot of short stories because I've been reading Lake of Souls, and I think that short stories as an art form can be extremely hit or miss. And actually, I have personal experience with this. I actually recently entered a short story contest and bombed it really badly.
Sorry, babe.
So it's, I learned a lot So like it wasn't a total zero sum. But I just think there's a when you place constraints on like your storytelling, when you say I'm writing a short story, to me personally, like that's a huge challenge. And I think in what, like 20 pages, this is like immaculate. I don't know about you guys.
It's incredibly well crafted.
Yeah,
honestly.
like
I'll give my background. Like we've talked before that like me and Bri are English majors. My major is actually in creative writing because I'd been homeless and I decided that if I was going to get a college degree just so I could get a government job, I might as well get a college degree in something I liked.
Nice.
So I got a degree in creative writing. One of the major things we did in those courses was write short stories. So like we didn't write a lot of like, here's a chapter of my novel that I'm thinking of doing. There was a lot of focus on short form stuff, essays for creative nonfiction and short stories for fiction, because I think the idea was that like you had to learn to create a plot or capture a scene succinctly, have a beginning, a middle, and end, wrap it up, even if it was fragmentary, like have a through line. Have a reader read it and come away with an idea about something or like understand what you were trying to convey with it. And there's tons of different ways to do that. I mean, famously, there's the oh God, I think it's Hemingway. It's like the saddest, shortest story ever. It's like For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn. And then there are short stories that shade into novellas because they are so fucking long.
Right.
And there are people who are really experimental. And there are people who start with like the beginning of the story is the day I was born and the end of the story is the day I died. You know, there's so much variation. But like you said, Brian, it's a challenge. You have a limited amount of words. You have a limited amount of pages. And you need to do what a novel would allow you to do in a very meandering way, almost. You have to do it fast.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I was deeply impressed with the craft of this story.
Agreed. Alice, what did you think?
I was actually really interested to hear what you guys thought of, because the concept of a story, like it's not hidden on this podcast that I know read good. I'm one of the brain fog millennials who just wants to watch anime on repeat kind of thing.
Alice is one of the most tender, sensitive, and thoughtful people I've ever known. But hold that in your mind.
My degree is in computer science because I wanted a functional degree, because I didn't want to do something fun. I wanted to do something that allowed me to go sit and read gender poetry. I think that this is a great story. I felt deep sadness reading it for a lot of personal reasons, but also because I'm not as well read as you two. I do not know the big words. I do not know the importance of the sentence structures, why you would make paragraphs this way, why you would suddenly change point of view in the middle of a sentence. Like, this does things with language that are very exciting, but are scary in their own way. Like, to me, a big dum-dum, right? But it's beautiful. It's so perfectly crafted to read that I never felt myself lost in this at all. But I also know it's written in a way that nobody who needs to understand the concept of it will ever read, and that makes me so depressing because it's such a direct hit. The IR signal has hit me. We have full tracking. We're out of Fleur.
I thought you would love,
I identify as an AH6 little bird. A fighter is hunting us, and I am afraid that my gunner has gender dysphoria.
It's a really good line. Like, okay, let me real quickly go through the sequence of events that this story covers. So I gave the summary, but basically we open on Barb and Axis in the helicopter headed towards this high school that they're going to blow up. The high school. It's at first, like, my understanding was like, oh, this must be like a converted military target. No, this is a high school. There's school buses, there's janitors. It's not currently in session. It's after school, but they mention at some point that there are people who are going to be bycatch. There are people who are going to be collateral damage.
Yeah.
And they are headed in to do this. And the first sign that something is wrong, Barb is talking a little bit about her experience of being this thing. But the first sign that something is wrong is she basically asks Axis, her gunner, to target, and Axis is hesitating very clearly. And like the dynamic, like Brian said, the dynamic between those two is going to be core to the story. The hesitation, it's so funny. It's like the first like 4 pages of the story set off the incident, and then after that is evasion and contemplation in a way that is like really, really cool. So they do successfully shoot at the target. They do successfully demolish this high school. And while they are trying to head home, they detect that I believe this is a jet fighter, Alice, I think?
Yes, JS-20.
Yeah, so a jet has picked them up, like was in the area, realized they were there, and they now have to evade the jet if they want to make it home safely. So what then happens is a sequence of evasion where Barb's excellence as a pilot is put to the test while this instability in Axis potentially threatens what they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as Barb takes actions, Barb is thinking about the context of those actions as gender performance as opposed to doing your job. One of the things that I brought up as like a general point, because we didn't like break this out into sections. One of the things I brought up was gender as performance as in acting versus gender as performance as in like combat effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. This is what I was saying about Alice's point earlier, is I think Barb is a character that's going to try and conflate those two things. Mm-hmm. And Axis is a character that is going to is someone who is conditioned to do that. But then, the moment he asks, he is asking, is bombing this high school right? In the same way that someone might ask, do these boots make me look like enough like a man? Mm-hmm. And so like there's a dichotomy there that I think is like really important. It's also something that people online love to capital R react to.
Yeah.
What's everybody's gender combat rating?
0. I'm bad.
I think mine's decent. I'm a butch farmer, and I think I've been really butch farming lately. I tilled a third of a field yesterday. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, one thing I want to say about this story is something I was taught when I was writing, especially for short story, is you don't start from, okay, what if this premise existed and how would I get there? You start from, we are there, what are the consequences? Yeah. So like if you've ever read the short novel The Giver by Lois Lowry, they don't start with showing you how the society that the characters inhabit is formed and how it came to be and with a bunch of history. They start you in the society and then head straight into the problem. Mm-hmm. This is a story that takes the meme, the transphobic meme, like I identify as an attack helicopter, which I've read the whole copy pasta. I thought about putting it in as reference, but like fuck them, like I don't care about that. We don't know. Yeah, exactly. What I'll say about the copy pasta is it's very much in that opening it's talking about how you would become an attack helicopter and how they should be respected and whatever. Yeah. This story, part of the subversion is just like, okay, that's cute. You came up with this idea. This idea has been implemented. What are the repercussions? We are talking about the American military-industrial complex. We are talking about exploitation.
Of course, the military-industrial complex would weaponize gender. It's a good concept.
I think it's a good concept. I think it is more surreal and absurdist in 2020 than it is right now. I think right now, the only reaction I have to it is this gives the government a lot more credit than I think it's currently due.
I think something to talk about the military-industrial complex of it all. This feels very much from a person who was in the military and was or became trans, trans. Like the reconnoitering that your personal happiness versus being a killer for hire, like there's just, I don't know, there's military bad.
I was thinking a lot about my favorite thing to do on this podcast, of course, is read a nonfiction book and then make it relevant to whatever we're talking about. But no, one thing I've seen in a lot of nonfiction books is discussions of scientific discovery are typically bracketed by DARPA contracts. Yeah. In the United States, if you want to make a breakthrough, if you want to have money to develop your very cool idea, you get military funding. And I think there's a really fun passage at the beginning of this story where Barb mentions that her blood has been genetically re-engineered to repel mosquitoes. And she says, you'll be getting that at some point because malaria from mosquitoes is a major problem in this world. But Barb got it first in the military. And over, that is the kind of history of technology. The internet starts with the military. Like so many innovations start with the military. And if you are wanting to pursue, another thing I couldn't help thinking about was people looking for the gay gene. Right. Like when you are trying to medicalize these situations, like they talk about when the doctors have finally isolated how these things are formed in the brain. When you do that, you open the door to manipulation. And I love that this story is like, yeah, the moment the door is open to manipulation, who is paying you to do this project? Probably somebody with deep pockets like the military. And then what is it going to be used for? It's going to be used for military hardware.
And I think also that to connect this back to the Year in the Shell too, it is also preoccupied with like, what does it mean to consent your body to the state?
Yeah.
And like, so like Barb is in a very similar situation to the Major in the sense that like their body and the mediation of their body and the regulation of their body is an ideological state apparatus. Like if we go to Althusser, right?
Except I like something that makes Barb different as a protagonist, and I think makes the story off-putting to some people. Barb is unrepentantly having gender euphoria the whole time.
Yes.
Barb loves being an attack helicopter. I've pulled out some quotes, but I love when she's talking about the decision to become an attack helicopter. She says, "But I decided I was done with womanhood, over what womanhood could do for me. I wanted to be something furiously new." Like, that compulsion, like, Barb is living her life. She is thrilled. She is thriving. Axis is what brings the instability. But I love that because this piece ends up being confrontational.
Right.
A lot of the things that it does, it talks about the experience of being this thing, which is sci-fi, but in terms that are very practical. I like doing this because it validates this and this. I had these life experiences that made me feel this way about this part of my body, and now it's different because I am this thing now. Like, it's really interesting in that way, but it is also very confrontational. A lot of questions that cis people have for trans people are, what is your body like? What have you done to your body? What modifications are in place? And how do you have sex? And this story runs right at those questions aggressively in a way that, like, I found really refreshing. There wasn't a lot of pussyfooting around much in this story. And also, I could see how, again, like, if you're looking for a reason to have a bad take on the story, you can find it. It's very easy, you know? But yeah, it's funny. So there's stuff on the setting that we get in the story, which is really fascinating. I also find the story really prescient in 2025 because we're dealing with so much horse shit about AI and like what it can do and what it can't do. The context of this story is that during climate collapse, the United States abandoned regions of the continent of the country, and most of them died, but some of them survived. And the reason this pear tree, Pear Mesa, the reason Pear Mesa has survived is because it was a credit union, but it had reinforced AI backing up the credit union. And that AI adapted to its purpose, which they say it's a black box. Like, there's no way to know why it happened this way, but it adapted to keep the people in the region alive, but separate from the United States. And that is something that can't be tolerated. I pulled a quote. Pear Mesa's AIs could not be modified by humans, thus could not be joined with America's own governing algorithms, thus must be forced to yield all their control or else remain forever separate. And that separation was intolerable. There's a lot of illusion that's drawn between machines and people in this story, and explicitly Barb compares herself at one point to an AI. It's a very different type of AI than we're used to talking about right now, which is a sort of scam.
Yeah, the AI that we're talking about now, we completely 100% understand how it works and its limitations, and its limitations are like the net, vast and infinite. They will never get to this point. They will never do your laundry for you. Using them is embarrassing. Anyway.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting that it's like, if we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about advanced algorithms and machinic thinking that would help govern us, and like where those things go awry because there is no like human oversight. And for all that Pear Mesa is weird and separate and thus must be destroyed, later in the story we realize that a lot of the directive behind what Barb and Axis are doing seems to be just as inscrutable.
Alice, do you have any thoughts on how, like, what at one point Barb talks about how as a woman she was kind of obsessed with machining herself, quote unquote, and what she specifically says to evoke this is how she would take pills to regulate her periods and to not give birth, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I don't know if we've mentioned this lately. Alice handwrites all of her notes in a cute little notebook, so she has to actually turn pages when she's trying to find things.
I thought this was powerful because there was one comment in this that I really loved. I'm going to make this about me. Is it okay if I make my interpretation of text about me?
Bitch, get in here.
Okay.
That's what podcasts is about.
Hey, listeners, I'm a trans woman. This affected me. So there's a part where she talks about what about gender? What is gendered about taking a photo of your taxi driver and their license plate number and sending it to your friend before you get in? And I had this moment of gender where at some point when I was younger, I started going out in dresses, which are gendered for some reason. Clothes are gendered. Gender is weird. I started going out, and at first, my father laughed at this. My father, a very male-gendered man. He laughed at this. This was funny. Then I started wearing Kevlar Under Armour. I started having air-to-air missiles strapped to me. I installed a 30-millimeter Vulcan cannon to my front.
Damn. And that's still there today. We see it right now.
That's right. And eventually I got a co-pilot. But at one point, he would laugh when I would go out. He said, "Oh, you're a hoot. That's funny that you're dressed that way." And eventually it turned into, you need to stay safe out there. Be careful. And that was very gender to me. And reading about this, about how you can take that fear, and the antagonist, Barb, transitions into an attack helicopter. And now she feels okay at all places. She strafes into conversations, strikes with a missile, and leaves. Sorry,
It's really good.
It's good. It's good. I think I love that interpretation.
Yeah, there's a specific quote that I really love about this. And I also think it gets at a kind of cis comfort thought, which is that, like, once you transition, it's like a switch flips and you are now...
Yeah.
We see a lot of this in discourse around trans men. It's like, oh, well, if you transition to become a man, you now have male privilege and you have no understanding of what it's like to be a woman. And I'm just like, hello? But I love this quote. So the cyclic stick answers to the barest twitch of wrist. And I remember once how that slim wrist made me think of fragility, frailty, fear. I am remembering even as I pitch the helicopter back and we climb again, nose up, tail down, scudding backward into the sky while aimed at our chasing killer. And I love the fact that it's like, just because you have transitioned does not mean the person you were before is erased. You have those memories. You have that perspective. And she contrasts it so often in the story in terms of, like, now I am happier because I am different, but I remember what it was like to be like this. And, like, there's another quote I love later on where she's talking to Axis and she's contextualizing how to have this interaction with Axis. Where it says, as a woman, I would have pressed Axis. As a woman, I would have unpacked the unease and the disquiet. As an attack helicopter whose problems are communicated in brief, clear datums, I should ignore Axis. But who was ever only one thing?
Yeah.
I really love it. Like I said, it is confrontational about a lot of things that people have just accepted about what it means to perform gender or even being trans correctly.
Nico, you said something interesting earlier, which is that this doesn't pussyfoot around, and I think it is very confrontational, and I think also it's very aggressive in that it's I don't know, especially nowadays, like, you know, at least in spaces where, you know, the on paper goal is like understanding and safety. We tend to put on like nitrile gloves when we talk about gender. We want to be extremely precise, and we want to make sure that we, you know, qualify and clarify everything we say with like a million identifiers and a million credentials. This is going to talk about gender as something that's violent and dirty and gross and like unhygienic and again, like as a mediation for state-induced violence in a way that I think, again, like you can see how this ruffles feathers. I think everyone comes to gender from a completely different angle. And I think if you're someone who reads stories and like wants to listen to what they are trying to tell you instead of like immediately going for how can I react to this for other people, you will realize that this is like a very, very personal and extremely intimate look at someone else's preoccupation with their angle on gender, right? Just because Barb is an unreliable narrator doesn't mean that she has absolutely nothing of value to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I really love getting back to gender as a technology, which I love that this talks about it so much. There's another quote. I mean, this is just going to be a podcast a little bit where I just read the story to you. If you have not read it, if you have not listened to it, links will be in the show notes. Like, please, just check it out.
Just please. It's very short.
Just please. But there's a quote, and it's, look at a diagram of an attack helicopter's airframe and components. Tell me how much of it you grasp at once. Now look at a person near you, their clothes, their hair, their makeup and expression, the way they meet or avoid your eyes. Tell me which was richer with information about danger and capability. Tell me which was easier to access and interpret. The gender networks are old and well connected. They work. It's such a it's fascinating.
Lips are not real. Lipstick is real.
Exactly. I could not stop thinking about the quote. Lips are not real. Lipstick is real. I could not stop thinking about that from Heaven Will Be Mine. Oh, it's so good.
While we're doing quotes, there's a quote in here that as someone who I don't know, I haven't done much introspection about the story because I still need to do a lot of work on like how I feel about gender for myself. But suffice to say, man, men, he, him stuff is not 1000% sufficient for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the quote, some people say that there is no gender, that it is a postmodern construct, that in fact there are only man and woman and a few marginal confusions. To those people I ask, if your body fact is enough to establish your gender, you would willingly wear bright dresses and cry at movies, wouldn't you? You would hold hands and compliment each other on your beauty, wouldn't you? Because your cock would make you enough of a man. And I don't know, that like gave me full body chills when I read it. Alice made a really good point earlier, which is that like the people who need to hear that sentence aren't going to make it far enough into this story to hear that sentence. And that's really, really unfortunate. You know what I mean?
It really sucks. It sucks. It's one of those things that it's like you put the work out into the world and you hope the right people will reach it or hear a quote or something. But like, yeah.
I want to circle back to something Brian said. I remembered the thought that I lost, that I dropped over there when I had to activate my warp radar so I could do a sick-ass twist spin in the air to shoot my Vulcan cannon that shoots time-activated grenades.
Alice is fighting battles you may never know about. Alice is just always fighting battles.
Brian said it very quickly, but it was in there, which is everybody has a different approach to gender. And so what I thought about reading this is I'm a trans woman. This has been such a major part of my identity and something I've explored for a long time. And to talk about being trans is, so you might have heard that there's one joke that people have about trans people, which is I identify as blank.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, you would hear this in variations of it. And at some point, my mind switched from the I'm questioning gender. Where am I going with gender? I'm gender dysphoric. I want to be that gender, not this gender. Very binary track. I don't want to be multiple things. To the Barb version where gender is your selection. And I think what I took from this and something that a lot of, I think, people who examine their gender do is you get to a gender that you want, but at the same time, it's kind of also assigned by society. So Barb is an attack helicopter, loves it, perfect. In the same way that cis women who love being a woman, they're in it, they love it, you know? But for me, I'm trans. That's my gender. I identify not as a woman, I identify as a trans woman.
Totally.
And I'm going to read a quote from you, which as a trans woman, I identified with. When I was a woman, I wanted to be good at woman. I wanted to darken my eyes and strut in heels. I wanted to laugh from my throat when I was pleased. Laugh so low that women would shiver in contentment down the block. That's great. I want to be good at woman.
To speak a little bit of the character dichotomy too, like that's one of the things that I was kind of poking at earlier, which is that like for Barb, you know, every action, every thought is and in some way going to trace back to gender for Barb.
Yes.
And you know, I think the story paints someone as Barb as someone who, you know, is they're a dynamic person living a life and they're finding their own joys in that life, and that's okay. And I also think the story has Axis, who is preoccupied with more than just gender. And I think it's important that the story also validates Axis because I can see people being like, oh, okay, so like, I don't know. You hear a lot that like transphobes think about trans issues way more than trans people do. And I think that that having these two characters with totally different sets of priorities that are still able to sink into one very effective thing that has a job that it does is really important to look at.
I think that's a really good point. Something I've been discussing recently, just like talking to friends and thinking about stuff is like, I identify as a cisgender woman, but I am a butch lesbian. And so there's an intonation to that of gender nonconformity. And I remember I had this last gasp in high school, my senior year of high school, where I tried really hard to be feminine. This was the era of really skinny jeans and ballet flats. And so I went out and I got a bunch of skinny jeans and ballet flats, even though I have men's size 12 feet, and ballet flats are at that point sort of an oar or some sort of like flipper. They were aggravating as hell to keep on my feet. I tried my hardest to keep my hair long and lustrous and wear it a certain way. I tried to wear makeup and do all this stuff. And I felt when I accomplished it well, that I had accomplished it well. And I felt when I did not accomplish it well, that I did not want to be seen. I did not want to be experienced. And then, I don't know, about 7 years ago, I asked my partner to cut all my damn hair off. I was done with it. I was sick of wearing it. I was sick of feeling like I had to manage it. I had hair down to my belt, and I had him cut it off to over my ears. And that was the first time I experienced anything like gender euphoria, even though I'm cis. I had finally found a facet of womanhood, butch womanhood, which is queer in its own ways. It's transgressive in its own ways, but I still identify as a woman. But it was interesting because, like, when I was studying feminism, I was so interested in the deconstruction of gender and gender roles and gender markers and identifiers and expectations. And then I got into queer theory, and it seemed like those were so important because that's how you could signpost that you were trans. Like, totally. You had to have the binaries, and you had to have a specific idea of the binary so that you could tell where you were. Like, you had to have those markers to situate yourself in transness. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I always struggled with, and it's something I still struggle with as a cis person. It's never too late to think about this stuff. And especially one of the things I like, Brian, circling back to the point about Axis, I was thinking about identifying in terms of accepted military identifications, such as being identified as a combatant, a civilian. I specifically was thinking about identifying as a conscientious objector and what it means if you take on that role and what punishments and expectations are placed on you. Because for me, I feel like Axis is gender queer and gender questioning, but it's like between being an attack helicopter or a conscientious objector. Yeah. Because Axis has questions about why they're doing this at all.
This is when I trauma dump on pod. Content warning, skip 5 minutes. So something that the story does is the relationship between Barb and Axis. And if you've ever been a person who's questioned their gender ideology in a relationship, it's a very scary thing to experience. Because what if your gunner has gender dysphoria? Can you still operate efficiently when fighting Peachtree High? Or do you need to register them as a flight risk and take them off flight status? So near the end of this, in one of the last 2 pages, they're discussing what just happened with the fight. And they retort back and forth, and Axis says something. Axis says, I didn't know if I would either, in response to the doubt if she could make the shot, or they could make the shot, which feels exactly like, I don't know if I love you anymore. I lose control for a moment, and the Apache rattles in bad air, and the tail slews until I stop thinking and bring everything back under control in a burst of rage. Transitioning is weird because it changes. It changes what people see you as, and sometimes you have a partner who can be there for your transition into an attack helicopter, and then they can leave. They can decide that they don't love you anymore. And even if you're the one transitioning, you might think that of your partner. It is a change. It's scary. I thought that this did very good about how dealing with gender, thinking through your own gender, never just includes you, especially when you have a co-pilot. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a scary thing for a lot of people because you don't want to lose flight status in life, right?
Mm-hmm. You don't want to use life status.
Yeah, to wrap that up, I have 2 quotes from sort of the end of the story that I really love that I feel like captured stuff. Maybe what Axis feels is a necessary new queerness, one that pries the tool of gender back from the hands of the state and the economy in the war. I like that idea. I cannot think of myself as a failure, as something wrong, a perversion of a liberty that past generations fought to gain. But Axis can, and maybe you can too. That skepticism is not what I need, but it is necessary anyway. And the other quote I would bring out is, dynamism requires instability. Instability requires the possibility of change. I really loved the parallels in the story drawn between needing to be unstable to move swiftly and when things are safe and what safe things are capable of doing.
Yeah.
I think it's a real it makes it feel necessary to take risks because it's important to be what you need to be and to express what you need to express. Like, I had a funny moment. I've recently did hunter's training, and I was dressed comfortably to go hiking in the woods. And during a presentation where I was being taught about Zone of Fire, the instructor referred to me as male multiple times. Said, this guy over here, what's his Zone of Fire going to be? You know, blah, blah, blah. Just read me as male. And it twigged wrong because I don't identify as male and I'm not transmasc and I don't use he, him. But there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that I had presented myself so butch that in trying to be respectful, he just decided to categorize me as male because dealing with whatever else was going on was going to be too complicated. There can be a satisfaction sometimes in being what makes someone uncertain.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally.
Anyway, we're not rating mechs this time. Obviously, the Apache Mystic is a 10 out of 10. But we are going to take a brief break. And then after that, we are going to come back and we are going to read some reader mail.
Hey guys, Alice here. Thanks for listening to On the Shoulders of Giants. We're really happy you're here, but if you know anybody who might be interested, we'd love if you share our work with them. If you are enjoying what we're doing, maybe send us a message, or what would really help us out is if you leave a review online. Really, a lot of the algorithms will push people down if they don't have reviews, so it really helps if you just go and write something on the internet. Heck, we might even read one on the podcast if it's really nice and makes our hearts go doki doki. So if you could do that, maybe do it, and thanks again for listening. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back from the break. We solicited listener mail about this story and the conversation around it on Blue Sky and in the OSG Discord. So now we're going to read these letters and talk about them, and Brian has put them together for us, so... The first one we got from friend of the show, August. Hi friends, having read the attack helicopter story, it quickly became one of my favorite pieces of short fiction, only edged out by Pistol Grip by Veena Jimen Prasad, which I highly recommend even though it's very not safe for work. So there's another little reading recommendation there.
Dirty.
It seemed like a lot of the criticism aimed at Ms. Fall was misplaced, at least in my mind. However, one piece of criticism that I feel does bear talking about is the way that she talks about racialized bodies. I don't recall if she herself confirmed that she's white, but I've seen some folks comment that the way she talks about racialized bodies is kind of fetishistic, especially when it comes to the main character. It wasn't something I noticed at the time I was reading it, but going back, I can definitely see it. I was wondering if that was something y'all had noticed too. Sincerely, August. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think... Well, one question you do have when you come to this is what is Barb's original name? She has it
appears to be Korean.
Yeah. It's because I was gonna say it appears to be like Southeast Asian-ish vibe of a name, and then she was given a pretty much wholesale white name as part of her gender expression, right?
And it's complicated because Barb isn't short for Barbara, but it evokes Barbara.
Right, so exactly.
It's like, yeah.
So like there is a question there. I'm assuming the only time I can think of this story really talks about a human body at all is when she talks about her pubic hair. And then
at one point she does also mention like wanting dark, glossy skin and things like that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I think to say that she is fetishizing racialized bodies is a little bit of a reach. I think maybe. The most you could say about it is that it may be a little bit indeliberate. That could have just been her trying to evoke the black sleekness of military aircraft, right? So like it can be. This is one of those to evoke like the old text. This is one of those like curtains are blue moments where it's like Death of the Author. Yes, we've talked about Death of the Author a lot on the show. I'm not going to get into it. We've gotten into it a bunch. If you want to learn more about how it actually is supposed to work in discourse, you can listen to some of our other episodes. But there's an impasse, right, where it's like, does the work end up inadvertently fetishizing racialized bodies? Maybe. I think putting that in the same conversation as the reaction to this publication is, I don't think it's sufficient. That's all I'll say, I guess.
So this question was funny to me because I know August mentioned in good faith, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
yeah, totally.
it's exactly the kind of question that was being asked at the time. It was something you could pull out and weaponize and say, especially because Isabel Fall, like I said, we didn't have the biographical information. I could see a world in which Isabel Fall, perhaps a white trans woman, posts this story and she's known in the community, and like we have this conversation. Perhaps the story isn't taken as bad faith because there's biographical information. The author is a known person. But then this criticism gets pulled out because it's also known that she's white. We don't know anything about Isabel Fall's race. We don't know anything. The name is the name. We know the birth year. We don't know anything. We just have the text, right? And what I kept coming back to when I was thinking about this is, one, this is the kind of like looking for something to find insufficient that I think can be really frustrating. And I also think this story fetishizes bodies, period. Like that quote that you were mentioning, Brian, talking about pubic hair. I loved that one. I pulled that out because it's talking about, fighter jet pilots shave everything down because they want to be smooth, right? But attack helicopter pilots don't have to
Is
have
that true, by the way? Do we know?
Not every... Not only the fast ones.
Oh, okay.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's a thing. High G suits are so tight.
Okay.
But the quote I'd pull out here is, it says, "Do these last details bother you? Does the topography of my pubic hair feel intrusive and unnecessary? I like that. I like to intrude, inflict damage, withdraw. A year after you read this, maybe those paragraphs will be the only thing you remember, and you will know why the rules of gender are worth recruitment." Like, this story is interested in being upfront about bodies, sexuality, the experience of existing a body, presentation, threat, violence.
Yeah.
And so if it feels, I felt race was kind of almost absent from this. When it appeared, it felt weird, right? It was like, oh, you had a sort of Asian looking name, and then that never comes up again, except like if you want to extrapolate about how America retools minority groups for its own purposes, right? But like there's allusions to different colors, different presentations, but for the most part, I felt like that part was missing, which for me makes it hard to ask this question about if it's fetishizing racial bodies, because if anything, I felt like race was an absent element in this to a great extent.
I think I'm going to speak to two things. One, I think this is a great book group discussion topic. And I think, here's my thought. So I've been trying to think about what I think about the controversy around this since it's been brought up. And here's my thought. I think people should be able to just sit down and be like, what do you think about race in this? And then people are like, interesting. Maybe the author meant good intent. Maybe they meant bad intent. Let's discuss it over a nice cup of coffee. And instead, I have 180 characters to tell you why you're a piece of shit racist for agreeing with this text. You piece of fucking shit. And so I'm taking the book club approach because I think good author intent is important, especially in this. It's so well written. And the fact that it went through inclusive, like it was group reviewed, I think.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. I think it's cool in that we are talking about the military industrial complex, and for a lot of trans people who are poor, which are traditionally minority, not white trans people, white trans people generally have easier access to gender affirming care versus minorities who might have to rely on joining the military to get that. So I think it's interesting in that way, but also I thought, when I got to the ebony covered skin or whatever, I was like, oh, that's just anti-radar paint. Okay. Obviously,
it's that black shit from Metal Gear Solid 4.
Hell yeah. So I think that's a good topic. I think it's a great question. Thank you for writing, August. That is a good thought. I hadn't considered.
All right. So our second letter comes from Sky. Alice, do you want to read this one?
Ooh, I can read. Hi there. A friend sent me your post looking for thoughts or experiences about Isabel Fall's short story, I Sexually Identify as an Attack Helicopter. I have a lot of thoughts about it. It is the only piece of speculative fiction that correctly identifies gender as a violent and imposed system. The narrator says that what they are doing is necessary for the survival of their people, and then they bomb a high school and say it will be a valid target because the algorithm said so. What a phenomenal use of unreliable narration. Quote, A world where the military uses neurosurgery to make you better at bombing the high schools that the AI tells you to bomb, end quote, feels extraordinarily prescient. One line at the end, quote, maybe what Axis feels is necessary new queerness, unquote, makes me sick to my stomach, and every time I read it. Parentheses, I think of this story as a horror story, so this is a compliment, in parentheses. Have we really fallen so far that queer could mean a weak and ultimately failed protest against state violence? Well, now that I think about it, I saw a cop wearing a my pronouns are he/him pin. So probably I'm working, parentheses on and off, in parentheses, on an italic hand calligraphy copy of the story, so that I can have a copy in my own handwriting. I've shared it with several of my friends to explain my gender. A friend of mine sent a copy to their therapist as a way to explain their relationship with gender as a system. Feel free to ask me more details about any of this. I sexually identify as an attack helicopter. It is one of my favorite short stories of all time. Sky. Thank you, Sky.
Thanks, Sky.
One thing this brought up for me, sorry, real quick, I'll say, it was funny. I forget what year it was, but a lot of stuff around gender and identifying as like using neopronouns, identifying as non-human stuff. The kind of conversation about the hateful meme before the story existed, I identify as attack helicopter.
Yeah.
Was in the mainstream. And my mom heard a story on NPR about people who identified as tractors. And my mom is a really open-minded person. And so she came to me kind of confused. She's like, I was in college. I was in queer circles. She knew this. So she was like, can you explain this to me? And I mean, I was like, fucking what, 19? I didn't know shit about anything, but I knew a little bit more about this than my mom did. And basically, I was trying to help her navigate this. I would have loved to have this story to share with her at that time, right? Because this story, like Sky said, articulates why you would identify in different ways and with different things and what kind of metaphors and parallels you can draw to help you understand yourself. And ultimately, that's what my mom came away with. My mom is a southern accented, white-haired, really older-looking woman who will throw down to the death for you in a bar if you're queer. Just
she's gonna drive the helicopter, the tractor on the farm one time and be like, I get it.
Right? Like, and to Alice's point about like, I wish we could have a book club discussion about that. I wish that was the response more people had when they read a news article that confused them. Was not to go, this confuses me, it's ridiculous, I'm going to hate this on principle, but to go to somebody who they thought might have more of an idea than them and go, can you help me understand this? And to have stories like this is invaluable because it will help you navigate that. I really appreciated that thought.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciated the, maybe what Axis feels is a necessary new queerness makes me sick to my stomach every time I read it. I think of the story as a horror story, etc. Have we really fallen so far that queer could mean a weak and ultimately failed protest against state violence? On one hand, like I appreciate this perspective on a story. I think the ability to kind of connect what a story's priorities are to like what anxieties people might have about the future and the world that they live in is really important. And I think Sky is someone who seems to be capable of doing that without making it dogmatic, which is what I think a lot of people online are incapable of doing. But I also think like it's interesting to think about it that way because like to me, as someone who has like identified very strongly and proudly with queer since probably they were like, I don't know, 14 or something, 15, I don't know. It's always meant that to me. And to me, weak is a descriptor that is not necessarily like a condemnation. I'm not saying queer people are weak. But I do think like there is a power differential that has been at play, like, since before I was born about it. And so like, to me, I agree, right. That this is kind of a horrific story and that this is like kind of a very strange and scary quote. I also think it is just something that's true. And that's what I liked about it. That's what it evoked in me. So just like kind of a slightly shifted perspective on that.
I love the thought of gender as imposed violence of the system because I think so of the people who listen to this, I think it's like pretty split evenly between queer identifying people of different levels of part of the cause or gender exploration. And then you just have people are just okay with what they're at and don't really need to interpret the entire system. It's a system of violence against certain people.
Yeah.
Some people can thrive in it, and so they don't see the violence of it. And I think I love the thought of having gender dysphoria about being signed an AH-70 attack helicopter by the government to go blow up schools, and then being like, oh, gender dysphoria is now fighting against that system. It's like, oh, the gender being imposed at a military level is a scary concept.
I mean, you know, I just mentioned earlier that, like, to me, part of the definition of queer comes out of defiance against an overwhelming kind of power redistribution. But I also think it's like this evokes something too, where it's like, you know, gender is a violent and imposed system. I think of that Tumblr post. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, where it's like, man, I hate gender. Gender sucks. Gender's so violent. And then the next post is, my beloved trans friend, actually, I really like gender. And then the third post is, rock on. Actually, I also love gender. And it's like everybody has a completely different approach to this. And I think that Sky's like response here is one of those in a way that I think is really valuable in the conversation. Again, without making it something
it's a voice I want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
I want all of these voices.
And if you're looking for kind of similar discourse, I was thinking about the police officer with the he, him pronouns pen. Eli Clare is a disabled queer activist who wrote a book called Exile and Pride. And one of the essays in that literally talks about the discussion of whether trans and gay people should be allowed in the military. And it's a lot of discussion about the fact that it's like, is it okay to shoot people with a machine gun if you have a rainbow sticker on the machine gun? I think that's another great perspective to look at this and interrogate themes that this is clearly playing with. To pull another quote that I had, because I loved it, from the story, but killing isn't a gender role, you might tell me. Killing isn't a decision about how to present your own autonomous self to the world. It is coercive and punitive. Killing is therefore not an act of gender. I wish that were true. Can you tell me honestly that killing is a genderless act? The method, the motive, the victim. When you imagine the innocent dead, who do you see? I've been thinking about that a lot, especially if you're following any of the coverage of what's going on in Gaza. A lot of people generally in any place are going to be more sympathetic to women and children, but there's a specific way that the gender of Middle Eastern men is handled and treated as an inherent threat. Part of the reason I said I felt like race was falling out of this, if you want to talk about a race that is almost as sexually policed, I mean, I think trans women are facing a lot of sexual policing. Black men, black cis men face a lot of sexual policing.
Absolutely.
And like all of those things come into this as forms of violence and forms of innocence. They're all tied up in that. It's really, again, this story has a lot of dimension to it that I think is really valuable. All right. So the third letter we received is from Z Ace. I will have Bri. Do you want to read this one?
Sure. I'm really looking forward to hearing what y'all at OSG have to say about I sexually identify as an attack helicopter. I am so pleased to have the opportunity to put my thoughts into words about it, both regarding it as a story and as well the whole deal when it came out. This is something, to some extent, I have avoided doing. To be frank, the backlash against the story has affected me pretty heavily, and I have some pretty bitter memories about it. And the larger social atmosphere that precipitated it. I'm still working my way around my thoughts now, so if you find this too rambling or too bitter, or just too long that I fully understand not including it, this is OSG. I don't know what you're talking about.
We're including
in terms of going too long.
Including it. It's all here.
I sexually identify as an attack helicopter, which
you could just call it helicopter story too. That was
a helicopter story. I also just wanted to say it condenses into an acronym, and it kind of looks like Isaiah, and that's why I immediately read that as Isaiah. Isaiah feels transgressive to me. No. The story feels more transgressive than many of the medically, surgically engineered military cyborg stories. It doesn't combine all the various cyberpunk elements together so much as to separate them apart from each other. Barb isn't a sexy cyborg and isn't an astronaut pilot of a cool giant robot, unfortunately. Sex and gender fuckery aside, Barb wears a regular flight suit and sits in a regular pilot's chair and operates regular helicopter controls as a regular person. There's no real metaphor to provide any comforting distance. And there isn't the heightened horror of more empty spaces style function to make it like the fun kind of uncomfortable. When it posits a future where military indoctrination adapts to encompass queer identities, it does it in a way that's boring. It takes all the fun out of it. Positive. It's a very grounded work with a very grounded effect on a genre. It's not only good on its own, but it makes other cyberpunk, if that's what you want to call it, fiction, hit harder because it helps remind you how awful and banal the real thing is. It also has some insightful things to say about the criticism of queer media from a queer perspective. Barb and Axe's conversation at the end could easily be read as a discussion of the ways queer audience relate to the stories they create and enjoy. Media like Helicopter Story should be subject to an analysis and criticism. There's almost no end to my anger about Isabel Fall's treatment. Two things about it stood out to me. The first was how effortlessly people who brigadiered against the story were able to consider themselves not only in the moral right, but as defending a minority people from a work of, as they saw it, bigoted hatred. The second was how I was not the least bit surprised. It was the inevitable result of nearly a decade of online spaces increasingly policing problematic media. It was a result of the mindset of if you liked the wrong TV shows, if you liked the wrong comic book movies, the wrong children's cartoons, or if you liked the wrong stuff but in the wrong, or if you liked the right stuff but in the wrong way, this was a reflection of some personal moral defect. All the worse if you were actually a creator. Depiction was always endorsement. It is a very paranoid approach toward reading in the Eve Sedgwick sense. It was also an antagonistic approach where liking the right things wasn't nearly as important as hating the right things. Of course, it came down hard on a trans woman who wrote the wrong kind of story about sex and gender. The line that stuck with me the most was, America names its helicopters for the people it destroyed. I hope this wasn't too heavy. LOL. I love the podcast. Smiley face. Z-Ace. Quick plug, Z-Ace does video essays on the super robot genre. Their videos are, I watched like 2 of their videos before I watched Bravern so that I could kind of like get comfortable. And it worked really well. So you should watch those because they're good.
One of the things I love that they bring up here right at the end is Eve Sedgwick and the paranoid approach towards reading. Mm-hmm. So this was something that I think a lot of people have reflected on since the story came out. We've talked about like Watsonian and Doyleist thinking on this podcast before, but there's this idea that there's the paranoid approach to reading, which is you read something and you look for the ways that it could do you harm, that it's doing things wrong, that it's saying the wrong thing. And then there's the reparative reading, which is you read something looking for things that are good, things that make you think, things that are positive, things that are beautiful, artistic, or interesting, or contribute to a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a binary way of thinking, but more often than not, especially as we've talked about a couple times now in the kind of take-based 180 characters, get reactions economy, paranoid readings will get you more engagement than reparative
Absolutely,
readings.
Every time.
If you skeet something that says like, oh, I really liked this book, I thought it raised some interesting questions about X, you will probably get likes from your friends. You may get some reskeets, but you may get one like reply guy who's like, oh, well, I thought those questions were poorly handled or whatever. But if you post something that's like, I fucking hate this book, it does so much damage to blah, blah, blah. I mean, a lot of the brigadeering, like I said about like, especially, I bring up N.K. Jemisin because a lot of people, especially trans people who value this story, feel very betrayed by N.K. Jemisin. Because she was one of the biggest names to share the brigadeering, basically. And it seemed like it was out of a fear of being seen as a bad ally if this was not endorsed, if you didn't help raise the profile of people who had concerns.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me of an anecdote. My tattoo artist, or like my main tattoo artist, shoutouts to him, is from Italy. And he told me this story once, and I think about it a lot in terms of how at least in our country right now, and in the last I would say 15 years of where media criticism as an industry has gone. He told me this story about how he had this really beautiful. Actually, he had it in the tattoo shop, so it was this really beautiful, really well preserved painting of Jesus, and just like. He was like just talking about how like as an artist, like he always really liked it because it was just like very technically consummate. And when his kids started going to school in America, he tried to gift that painting to the school and they wouldn't accept it because it was too religiously whatever. And he was like, to me, it was just a beautiful painting. And now like I have to when I look at it, I think about all of the things that people are hung up on, And so like I think about, when on Mecca's Blue Sky like a couple days ago, like Darling in the Franxx was in circulation for some reason, and like that is one of the controversial shows in anime, and especially when it comes down to how it talks about gender and sexuality. what happens when Trigger gets its big meaty paws on human reproduction. That happens. And like
we all have really cool hair.
Yeah, they all have really cool hair. No, it's one of those things where it's like, a lot of the things that I appreciated about Darling in the Franxx aren't in the conversation at all, because what is in the conversation are all of the ways that it does X and Y, things that are bad in the online discourse. Do you know what I mean? It's very we get stuck in these modes of engaging with media. Like this Z-Ace's correspondence like talks about the depiction is always endorsement, all of the liking all of the right things as if it's in the past. And I think it's actually still really endemic to online discourse. So that's just something that like when I read this the first time, that was something that I was really preoccupied with.
And I mean, I do think queer media tends to be subject to disproportionate scrutiny.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to say, I also liked the line about us naming our weapons after the enemies that we've defeated, or the people we've quashed. It was a good line. But I also want to say that I think, especially, we talk about, Brian brought up that everybody has a different level of engagement with gender. And I think, especially in some facets of queer community, there is so much of this interest in you have to be well-read and correct, and you need to be doing the studying on gender all the time.
You haven't read enough theory.
You haven't read enough theory.
And I think I like, and that's good. I think that can exist, and I want to hear it. When I hear it, I just don't have the time. I'm so sorry. I don't have the time. I've got to go blow up
And you shouldn't have to apologize for that.
But I think that says a lot that I feel like I should apologize for not being well-read.
No, and like, so my response to that has always been like, if you were really interested in the like capacity, or if you're really interested in like the modality of other people being able to educate themselves, you would try to offer insight instead of just shaming them for not knowing something. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually run into this a lot. My very brave spouse is not as well read as I am. And I've learned to, instead of I mention something and they go, I've never read that, I've never seen that, I don't know what that word means. Instead of going, really? You don't know that? I go, okay, so it's sort of like this. And I like try to give either a elevator pitch on if I'm talking about a book, or an analogous definition if I'm talking about a word. Because when you share knowledge with people, that does more good than just making them feel bad and making yourself feel superior.
Exactly. It's like how to have a conversation in some ways, but like, I also wanted to clarify too, like, I don't mean, because this is also a subject of discourse, I don't mean it is your job to educate people. I mean, it shouldn't take that much effort for you to say something like, here is a source, let me boil down this thing. If you are meaningfully engaging with theory, you should be able to tell somebody in like a sentence the vibe. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you're reading theory so that you can pull quotes to get a gotcha on somebody on Blue Sky, then that is, I don't think you're learning as much as you could. I'll just say it.
Yep. Yeah.
I think the all three emails are very important to me. All three flash transmissions on gender are very important to me. Thank you so much.
What is gender?
What is gender?
You know what?
Gotta have that drop.
Yes, we do. Well, I will go ahead and wrap us up then. This has been...
I brought a poem.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
Alice brought a poem. Hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Okay.
Hi, I'm... this is the Alice sidebar. Play gentle music for this. Thank you.
Okay.
Editor's note.
Gentle in what way? Like gentle like Zen, or gentle like virtual novel?
Delicate.
Visual novel.
Ghost of Tsushima.
Okay.
Okay. So this was a very heavy piece for me. I cried reading this. It evokes a lot of emotions, which I think we can, but I want to leave this with something positive. So if you've listened this far into this episode, you probably have had thoughts about gender. And I know a lot of us are pretty sure at where we're at, or kind of dialed in, but not everybody is. And some people are at that moment when they're waiting to have that question about their flight status. And I started my transition over a decade ago. And when I was starting, I went and I had to go to a Planned Parenthood. I had to get checked for a bomb. A protester waved an anti-abortion sign at me because I was dressed as a girl at the time. and she just thought I was going to go get that baby murdered, I guess. I don't know.
Alice, I really do need you to promise me that you aren't going to get an abortion, though.
No promises. My body, my choice.
Okay, thank you.
I got an abortion while this episode was recording.
Yeah, I felt it was bad that you left the camera on, but okay.
So I went in and I had done all of this work. I had looked up the research. What do you need to do to get on hormones? What do you need to do to start this journey? Or what do you need to do to engage with gender? I had gone and found an actual licensed psychologist because I'd read something on the internet that said you needed a signed letter from a psychologist. That meeting was an hour long. She signed it in 5 minutes with talking with me because I knew what I was about. So I sat down and I was like, talk to the doctor. And she was like, no, you don't need that. By the way, I can just give you this.
Only if you live in the UK,
and you can explore gender. And she handed me something and she said, this is a poem that I've been handing out to every person who has started a gender journey, she called it. And it was shittily photocopied. You can see it here. This is the original one. You can tell she's been photocopying this.
Oh, that's college prof.
That's
level
college prof. Yeah,
photocopied.
100%.
So this one is for those pilots out there who have yet to wear their gender like Mecha Musume, swap it out, put on a different flight suit. Your gender is your mech. Your mech is your gender. You are wearing it and piloting gender every day. And I'd like to read you this to encourage you to explore that hangar that is gender and maybe try out a different suit.
I love you so much.
One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you solely recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing that you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Mary Oliver, The Journey.
Oh, Mary Oliver, the champion.
Now put Mecha Musume power-up sounds right here. As I put on my battle suit of gender and fly away from my poetry reading.
I love that. Like, listen, y'all, it is a fucked up time to be trans. In any country, but especially like from our perspective, America and the UK, especially with the recent news from the UK Supreme Court, it's fucked right now. But like, you may meet a nice doctor who gives you a photocopied poem about how your journey is beautiful. You may meet a child who has never encountered anyone like you and is enchanted and loves you for just what you are with no context. You may meet my mom at the grocery store and she'll probably try to talk to you in line and it'll be kind of awkward, but she means well and she will hug you if you need it. Like, there's a lot of really vocal shitty people on Twitter and in politics, but there's a lot of good stuff too.
A hard OSG stance. Continue being yourselves. Be yourselves loudly in public because it gives other people permission to be themselves loudly in public.
Is this a queer podcast?
This is a queer podcast.
No, it's
We're
a
coming
podcast about mecha.
Yeah, I'm sorry to everyone who followed us for the Tankhead coverage and is now on a journey, but welcome to the journey.
I'll just say I recently interviewed John Durham from Space Colony Studios vis-a-vis Stories from Saul the Gundog. And one of the things that we talked about is him coming as a cis white male to like being an online presence and realizing that like actually Mecha's kind of gay as shit.
Welcome to the journey.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. That's been this episode of On the Shoulders of Giants, our bonus, where we discussed Isabel Falls. I sexually identify as an attack helicopter. Do y'all have any parting thoughts?
Whoever is listening to this, I'm cheering for you.
Yeah. Gay rights.
I want to read a final quote. We talked about the meaningful ones. I want to talk about a funny one.
Okay.
Quote, "If you disagree with the war, so be it. I ask your empathy, not your sympathy. Save your pity for the poor legislators who had to find some constitutional framework for declaring war against a credit union.
Imagine a world where Congress is finding frameworks at all.
Imagine a world where
They would
Congress
just disappear. Peachtree High.
Oh my god. All right. Thanks for listening. Pilots, remember you can reach out for advice from the team at our email, questions@osgpod.com. And hey, if you didn't hit the cutoff for thoughts about this story and you still have them, send them in. We're always happy to chat. Non-pilots can also send questions or feedback to the same address. You can catch up with us on social media, links in the description for updates and more. You'll also find a link to the show Discord there. Come hang out. Probably discuss this more. Meet cool trans people. Links to the text of Isabel Fall's story, the archived audio version, and articles about the story mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes. Until our next regular episode, despite everything, try not to assume the worst. Read critically, but reparatively. Take back your power any way you can. Goodbye. I love you.
Alice. I liked the part in the story where they were like, I love you. Barb.
Brian.
Nico.